Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to speak about more of what's happening with Pluto, focusing specifically on Pluto stationing retrograde in just a couple of days from now. This is a part of a larger series of talks that I'm giving on Pluto. So I've created a playlist on all of the Pluto 2023 talks that I've given, one or two with someone else as well. This is because the Pluto transits of 2023, and I've said this many times, I really consider to be the core transits of the year. Pluto squaring the nodes. In a way, many of the other transits that are happening this year are in total alignment with this Pluto, right? The eclipses, Pluto squaring the eclipse points. Jupiter soon to enter Taurus, right there on the north node squaring Pluto. This Pluto square in the nodes is so deep, and there's so much to unpack. So I'm going to focus on Pluto moving retrograde and also unpack some other dimensions and perspectives on this Pluto square that I don't think I've really addressed so far. If you want to take some time to have a deep dive into this Pluto square in the nodes archetype, please check out the playlist. So I mentioned in one of my recent eclipse videos that a very interesting thing is happening. Pluto stations retrograde just after the solar eclipse that happened and just before the upcoming lunar eclipse, and will remain retrograde until October during the next eclipse window. So eclipses happen in 6-month windows, and Pluto is basically retrograde during that entire time. And what's more, the midpoint of that retrograde in July is the exact time where Pluto exacts a square to the nodes. It really puts so much meaning and emphasis in terms of the greater evolutionary cycle that's unfolding now on these eclipses. And I do consider there are certain transits of this year that are sort of essential turning points or nodal points, we can say, within the context of the greater Pluto unfoldings of 2023. These two eclipses happening now are one of them. Pluto stationing retrograde are one of them. So absolutely, we are in the midst of a month, of a time period, where there is a lot of essential change. Right? June, July will be one of them into August, and then October will be another one of them. Right? And then the whole Venus retrograde is another really important part of this journey. Venus will be ruling the transiting south node, and in conjunct to Pluto as well. So what's happening now with the eclipses and Pluto stationing retrograde, it's like lots and lots of energy is being focused on this Pluto work. And so it's actually really helpful to give some more time to look at it, understand what is this about, what's the archetype, what's actually unfolding within consciousness now. So I'm going to start by speaking to a little review of what it means to address Pluto retrograde in general, and then specifically Pluto retrograde at this particular time. So I often say when it comes to any planet stationing retrograde, it's as if that planet is conjunct itself, right? It's like it slows down and comes to a point and it's deeply quiet and still. And the retrograde archetype in general really brings us into a point of introspection and reflection relative to the consensus conditioning of our own personal patterns, right? What is our own status quo? What are we familiar with? What are we just doing? And then the retrograde comes along and it has the potential to invite or induce a deeper self-reflection. So Jeff Green taught with retrograde brilliantly that it's an individuating archetype. We accelerate our own evolution potentially and further individuate ourselves by way of becoming profoundly more self-aware of what am I really doing? Where am I really going with this? We don't just act in the same ways. Now, Pluto retrograde, it's not like Pluto goes retrograde, so now you're going to go deep into your own shadow and look at stuff you're not wanting to look at. That's Pluto in general. Like Pluto is deep dive into your shadow. Pluto is desire. It's what we're most attached to. It's what we're most afraid of happening. It's where we hold on to the deepest psychological control and internal sense of weakness that we're not really wanting to look at all the time. So one useful way that I like to describe the archetype of Pluto retrograde is we can think of it creatively as a strategy built into the mechanism of what we can call evolutionary imperative, like the the design of life, the evolutionary design of life, has these retrograde cycles, which induces a necessary withdrawal from whatever it is we are familiar with or comfortable with, in order to further look at that which we would not otherwise elect or choose to see on our own. And there are two general ways we can think of that. And Pluto is always this quality of soul work, of looking very deeply, and that's possible all the time. We can have certain dynamics unfolding, certain things occurring that we don't want to happen. I would much prefer this and this and this wasn't happening. I would much prefer life wasn't doing the thing that it's doing, whatever it's giving me or whatever it's taking from me. So that non-preferential experience of life oftentimes not being what we want it to be, then by necessity bringing us to a threshold of content, of unconscious content that we haven't looked at, that we didn't believe we were ready to look at. And this in particular will resonate with the energetic of feeling uncomfortable and unwilling. That's a very common experience. And when Pluto stations and goes slow, the sense of resistance, which is usually met with a quality of, there's something fundamentally wrong here, or here's why life is wrong, or like I don't want to be doing this, or this is not my fault, or whatever it might be. Some sort of argument with reality that reflects our resistance to really meeting this particular threshold. The other expression, these are just two expressions that come up in my mind in this moment, is we're looking at something very deeply. Like, oh, here's a dynamic or a pattern or psychological piece that I'm really wanting to see. Pluto stations retrograde, and it's like there is, what's the word? Like a vortex that just like brings us like, oh, there it is. Oof, right? Like we're looking at it, and now like we can't not look at it. A very profound fixation. And that too can be very uncomfortable. And, within all of this, we will offer various levels of willingness or resistance, cooperation or resistance to what's unfolding right now. But that's one way of understanding the retrograde archetype. There is a deep movement within to access a threshold of psychological self-awareness and self-responsibility beyond what we've known how to access on our own through our own will. And we have to remember that life is designed for all of this. So we can't, on our own, go deeply enough to uncover everything. I mean, we can if we have a really strong determination to evolve, but we also can't. I mean, like, we can only go as far as we can, is what I'm saying. Try in the next 5 minutes to go all the way. Try your best is what I'll say. That's really all we can do in the present moment. And we really yield ourselves and respect life and its program, which is beyond our understanding, although we can begin to develop and apprehend more of the intelligent design as we grow. And astrology is a helpful way of mapping that for sure. But really, it is beyond our own understanding. It's always happening before our understanding of it. Like life is, and then we're like trying to map it. It's going to lead the way. It's going to bring us to places that we, maybe on a deep level, we're like, I'm here to do this work. I want to grow and I want to evolve. And then we get there and I don't want to be there. Right? And that's how it is. We're always offering some fluctuation between cooperation and resistance. As Pluto begins to build momentum, then these dynamics begin to unfold. And oftentimes it's going to be, here's some information, another book, another relationship, another experience, a conversation. Elements are going to unfold that maybe aren't quite within the realm of what we've expected, but will be very relevant and helpful for this deeper exploration of ourself. And during the Pluto retrograde time, we can say, we're strengthening our capacity to stand in strength and alignment in the midst of being uncomfortable. This really then yields an immense fruition, immense harvest during other moments in our life where we're called upon to make certain choices, where we're called upon to demonstrate our strength and to actually actualize and manifest, crystallize the strength in life in very specific ways. And I want to give you an example. I've been really interested in this guy named David Goggins. A really interesting person. I'm very inspired by him. I'm learning a lot from him. He's very interested in fitness and pushing boundaries. But one thing he says is people oftentimes think that they need to perform, right? Like do your exercise routine for a certain goal, right? They need a purpose. Like I'm doing these push-ups so that I can look really good in a swimsuit. I'm running this mile so I can win this race. He says try to perform well without a purpose. And what that means is push yourself all the way. Pass your thresholds. Get stronger. Why? Not because there's a particular goal you have in mind, but because you're going to need that at some point. One day, something's going to happen. He was saying that one day someone came to him and says, David, I can't seem to get motivated. I've gained 20 pounds in the past several weeks and I don't seem to find a good gym for myself. And his response is, don't wait for something to motivate you. Like, don't wait for a purpose, right? For that relationship or for that job or for that, this is what I'm here to do with my life. Be your own motivation. Be your own goal. So one thing that he really emphasizes is pushing our comfort. And this is my paraphrasing of something that I've learned from him. It's been really interesting for me, a very interesting inquiry. Push your comfort zone, get uncomfortable, and don't stop just when you're tired. Something I've been thinking about is when I do push-ups or pull-ups, there's a threshold in working out where you can reach muscle exhaustion. And I've noticed, most of the time I stop at the number I told myself I'm going to stop at, and then I'll feel good. I've done my workout, I'm breathing, I can feel my heart is pumping, and that's healthy, and I feel good about that. I've been loving applying this idea of passing my goals, passing that minimum, and going further, and then going further, and then going further. Why? Well, life is going to push me to go further anyway. It is, and it's going to continue, and it's going to continue. And each time life pushes us to go further than we want to go, we have to learn how to develop an attitude of willingness and cooperation. We have to learn to recognize that we are more capable and more stronger than we've known, but we've been weak, we've been unwilling, we've been afraid to actually push ourselves. And so we want to stay comfortable, we don't want to be challenged, and we don't want to be pushed. So this particular retrograde time is a strong push. For sure, these eclipse periods have and will continue to bring forth dynamics that might actually be very much unwanted. Essential change is happening now. These changes may have been in the works for a long time. It may not feel comfortable, and for sure, there's not a clear gauge in terms of where is this going? How can I map or navigate where this is all unfolding? No, there's too much psychological movement to be able to pinpoint anything concretely right now. And actually, if we try to make too many plans from our limited awareness, we might just create a little more mess. This is a time to just be very honest and to meet courageously what's happening, what really is. And I think we often forget that life on its own, without our control, without our constant manipulating to try to make things the way we want them to be, life will on its own bring what's needed and take what isn't. Life has its own intelligence and its rhythm and its own program. But because we're so attached to outcome, we very seldomly feel secure enough to just let what happens happen. Almost like, let me just see what happens. Let me do what I do, right? And see what happens. And not be attached, or I'm attached, but let me not attach to that attachment too much. Let me not allow my attachment or my concern with outcome to be so strong that it becomes a requirement for my happiness. I've been listening to also a lot of Michael Singer. I love Michael Singer. He wrote The Untethered Soul, The Surrender Experiment. I highly recommend him. He has some great quality teachings, and I'll post one of it in the description below online. One thing that he said, and you'll hear this in the talk that I'll post, is in some way, we're all concerned with outcome, right? You go on the date, and after the date, you're worried about, okay, how did that go? Do they like me? Should I text them? Should I not text them? Should I go out again? Did I mess it up? I said this thing, or, there are so many examples in life where we are just in our head because we're so concerned with the results. Right? What will happen? You go to the job, and you're so concerned with getting the job. And if you don't get the job, it might really impact you. Or if the person ends the relationship. Or if you end up losing money on that experiment. And we're so concerned with outcome because we're not okay with ourselves. We fundamentally aren't okay with ourselves. And we don't really want to admit that. And so we really need life to act a certain way for us. If life will result itself in this way, I won't have to deal with how uncomfortable I feel with who I am. I won't have to deal with my underlying discomfort with my being. And life isn't working out the way I want it to be. Uh-oh, how can I make it be like that? And he gives this example, and I think I've shared this here before, and I'll say it again. It's like going to Disneyland. What's the purpose of going to Disneyland? To experience it, right? You don't want to get so caught up in like the right ride or the wrong ride or the results of it. Just there to experience it. That's what life is for. I had this dream, and I think I'll sing it at the end of this video. The purpose of your life is this moment. I'm certain that I've shared these lyrics before. And the purpose of your song is to sing it. The purpose of your song is to share it. And I've added these lyrics. In your pain and in your grief, there's nothing that you need to keep. Give it all to the one. The one that holds it all will hold you as you fall, sweetly undone. It's safe to just fall. It's safe to not have any control over the changing of life. And I think what arises as we let go of control are all the doubt and the negative thoughts we have about ourselves. And here are a few that I'm able to identify. One is, I did something wrong. I did something wrong that things are the way they are right now, and I need to change that. And that's very different than the attitude of, I'm willing to continue to grow and understand more. But what's happening now is absolutely 100% the only thing that could be happening now. It is not the result of me doing something wrong. Because the story, doing something wrong, itself doesn't do anything about what's happening now. Cultivating more self-awareness, becoming more psychologically self-aware of, okay, here are some things that I did because I was attached to this, I wanted this outcome, and here I am now. And we can then begin to make some changes, perhaps. But even those changes are going to be happening across the template of a greater evolutionary trajectory. We can't improve ourselves enough or change ourselves or our behavior enough to make things not the way they are. So we have to be really mindful of the shame or the punishment or the guilt of, this is my fault or I've done something wrong. And to really be mindful that we're just orienting that towards the direction of, what are some psychological patterns and dynamics that, now that all of these things are unfolding in my life, now that I am where I am, let's look at myself. Sometimes the gift of things happening, of loss, of change, is that we finally can stop trying to make it be the way we want to, because often we're just perpetuating unconscious behavior the whole time. Right? oftentimes when someone dies, right, or we lose a relationship or a relationship changes, we become deeply aware of patterns that we've been playing out in our life because we've been so attached to having a particular experience with whatever object we were otherwise focused on. Okay. The other attitude is the blame and the victimization. Things are the way they are and I don't like it, and it's someone's fault, right? They did this, it's right. And again, we have to be mindful that we're not getting stuck in that way of thinking, because that doesn't actually allow us to become more psychologically self-aware, remembering that perception is the result of a desire. Desire itself is connected to our deeper attachments, what we are really needing to happen. Perception is linked to desire because what we are perceiving is by no means objective. I often speak about this. This is a core Pluto teaching that Jeffrey Wolf Green taught. You have two people walking into the room, they're going to see completely different things according to what's happening psychologically inside of them. Completely different realities. So our perception points back down to whatever's unresolved in our life. I mean, just, you know, someone that you dated 20 years ago that like cheated on you calls you up one day. How are you going to perceive that conversation? How are you going to think of them? Well, it's going to really depend entirely on whatever psychological dynamics are still inside of you. If you've resolved it, always, the consequence of having resolved and come to peace with our own content is always going to be joy. Always going to be openness and curiosity. Oh, so good to talk to you. I haven't thought of you in a long time. Or I was just thinking about you. Just an attitude of deep curiosity for the present moment. That's the attitude we want to pray for. That's the orientation we want to do our best to cultivate. Because that orientation says, however we've gotten to where we are now, whatever's happening, this is where the path is. And any negative attitude based on my own self-relationship or my perceptions of others, one way or another, isn't actually going to help me navigate this present moment. We always need to look at the negative behavior, negative attitudes, but there's this art that we learn to practice. I think Pluto retrograde is also a time of, retrograde in general, again, it's really individuating, so we can cultivate more of an embodied, masterful way of being with that planetary function. Pluto retrograde can become a time of becoming more masterful at gracefully doing the Pluto work. Because one way of thinking of the Pluto retrograde is also, it's like a stage is set up where you have to look at it now. It's like, it's slow down, look at it right here. Don't pass go, don't collect $200. Like, and what do you do when you can't move forward and you're just faced with the content? You might relax a little bit. Oftentimes high intensity yields great relaxation. It's like, here I am, let's face it. And thus we can cultivate more artfulness, more grace. The Taurus polarity to Scorpio, right? Taurus North Node. More grace, more relaxation in looking at all of these things and meeting the content of our life. And that's always a really great sign when we're not tensed up and we're curious and we're healthy and we're choosing to live even while there's so much that we don't understand. So I was looking up some Michael Singer quotes because I was thinking of speaking about him in this video. And when I looked it up, I found the most amazing quotes. And I just want to read you some of them because they're all just like great. When a problem is disturbing you, don't ask, what should I do about it? Ask, what part of me is being disturbed by this? This is such a beautiful quote. Don't let anything that happens in life be important enough that you're willing to close your heart over it. I mean, this is such a Pluto teaching. Someone did something to us, said something to us. Oh, I can't believe they treated me that way, right? I don't want to love them. I'm not going to have them. I'm not going to trust them. I'm not going to open up to them. Who's worthy of your trust? Who's worthy of your love? How do we determine that? If we're determining this based on how someone treats us, we're going to be living a life where we trust in a very disempowered way. What's the sign of an empowered person? They give freely. They're not afraid of what's being taken. They're not worried about whether their gifts are received or appreciated, because they're not looking for others to make them feel a certain way. And so when we speak about trust, it's another way of saying, I can be myself around you. It's not like trusting you with the car keys. The energy of trust is, I can feel myself around you, because I'm not needing you to give me permission to have an open heart. Oh, you just said some really mean things, or, surprised me with something that was unexpected and hurtful, or just cut me off of your life. Whatever it might be. My boss just fired me with, no expectation, no reason, and just whatever it might be. Where it becomes personal, it is actually, to me, more of an interesting point of reflection than the default belief. This is personal. And how should I relate to this person now? I'm more interested in the fact that things become personal in the first place. And if this feels far-fetched, you actually can look at your life and think of many examples where it's not far-fetched. Children, especially if you're a parent. Children might do or say things that are unloving or unkind. We don't take it personally, most of the time, ideally, right? In general, we'll be able to meet that with patience and love and understanding. We'll have an attitude where we're not even going to entertain for a moment that this child is attacking us or betraying us or hurting us. No, it's a child, and that child actually needs our guidance and our support and our love unconditionally. And as a parent, I'm learning it's so important that we actually never express frustration to a child, even if they're needing correction. Once we express frustration, we're teaching them that they are wrong. We're teaching them that in some way they are undeserving of love and patience and tolerance and care. We can set boundaries and teach consequence, right? And have good boundaries and rules with our kids. But the moment we let anger and frustration out of the bag and we actually direct that toward them, we're teaching them something that we're actually all trying to heal from, right? And we're just passing it on. And, we do that, and it's just really humbling and important to come back to that realization. But why don't we just do that with each other, right? Why don't we treat each other that way? Well, I can't treat that person that way. There's always going to be that threshold for us, me included. That person does not deserve my trust and my love. I cannot be peaceful and happy and content with that person. Is that true? What are we really denying ourselves in our resentment, in our choice to hold on? And really the uncovering, and this is what Pluto Retrograde can give to us, the uncovering is we're not upset for the reasons we think. This is one of the earlier Course in Miracles teachings. We think we're upset because of a thing that a person did to us, but not so. I'm just inviting us to explore that threshold where, all right, I've done 10 push-ups, I'm done. What if you do some more? What if you can do 10, what if you can do 20 more? And you just never allowed yourself to try. And you get to that point where I really can't push up anymore, and you have to rest, right? You reach a genuine threshold. Most of the thresholds that we reach when it comes to the self-responsibility we're willing to cultivate for our own attitude, our own thoughts, where we're willing to take responsibility for what we're feeling and not look on the outside for it, the threshold is usually self-determined. There was a time when I was in China, a very short time at a Taoist temple, and I got very sick while I was there. So most of my time there, probably 75% of it was just healing. And I learned some Qigong while I was there, but my Shifu didn't even want me to practice it while I was sick. So I just spent a lot of time alone writing, no social media. It was a very beautifully internal time for me. And as I began to recuperate, I had like a week left, and I wanted to learn as much Qigong as I could. I wanted to take the time that I was there and milk it for all it was worth. And I found myself getting really tired and being like, oh, I should just, this is too much for me, I should go to bed. And one of the students who the Shifu, my teacher, directed to teach me, said something that really bothered me at the time. He said, you need more yang practice, yang being masculine, like active, rigorous Qigong, right? As opposed to more of the gentle yin work. And a lot of the yang practices would involve like a lot of running or running up the mountain and, rigorous physical activity. And I was really resistant to that, and I felt defensive of, no, I'm recuperating, I'm really, in general, I get really fatigued really easily, I need more yin practices. And I can really understand that perspective, and in many ways, I deeply resonate with the yin practices and thrive on gentle cultivation. Slow, quiet stillness is really important to me. But what he invited, and that I'm just really beginning to think a lot about, and that I feel Pluto Retrograde is actually teaching us right now, those yang practices really are an invitation to stay engaged in the midst of discomfort beyond the threshold that we're familiar with. And like David Goggins teaches, don't give up when you're tired. He actually says, there was a quote, don't stop when you're tired, stop when you're done. Go the extra mile. Don't just stop when you've done the minimum requirement. And just cultivating that attitude as a way of being, as a stance of being in life. Because then when things get really difficult, we've already learned how to stay there for it. We've learned how to not give up. And so life will teach us. Like, we don't have to choose necessarily, unless you got like a lot of Aries, first house, or strong Mars stuff in your chart, or strong Pluto stuff, really. It's not necessary to like be a super extreme person that's going to be like, I'm going to run 70 miles today and, and then go a few extra. But it is healthy to cultivate a habit of that, and to cultivate the attitude, the pattern, the habit of going further than I knew I could, and finding greater health, greater vitality, greater aliveness, greater wellness, greater strength, greater energy, through the habit of crossing these thresholds where I have otherwise given up. And how is that useful in my life? Well, evolutionary necessity is going to be asking me and you, it's going to be asking all of us to be stronger than we've otherwise known. So we can really take this time as a wonderful period of deep inner cultivation, especially considering the fact that there's so much that we can't see right now. Again, the threshold of psychological self-awareness is probably minimal, because there's so much that's beginning to emerge, and a lot of big changes that are yet to happen in the coming months. I really think essential, cardinal turning point life changes. Things are just beginning to reveal itself now. Like, the process has been set in motion, and Pluto stationing retrograde and this lunar eclipse is really going to be sealing the deal and revealing much more of it. So let us continue to cultivate greater strength and capacity relative to being a person that is willing and able to and ready to evolve. And here's the words I want to use. Strengthening our threshold to stand in our joy, to abide in our love, to abide in our peace. Can I commit to and hold fast to my commitment for joy and happiness and aliveness, for purpose in this moment here too? That's the threshold. Something that I love doing in the kitchen, and I've just developed this habit. When I was in my 20s, I was sharing a house with other people, and one of my roommates once complained that whenever I began cleaning the kitchen, and we had like a schedule of who would cook a meal and who would clean, I would never complete. And it was interesting. I would start cleaning, and then I would just feel like that was enough, and I would stop. And she got really frustrated by that, and I was like, wow, I do that. I also stole food from people's pantries without even saying, like small amounts of like granola, until someone said, the monk's stealing my food. And I was like, I'm stealing food. So I had all these behaviors that I was like just justifying, and I wasn't really thinking about it or bringing self-awareness into it. And an ethic that I've really developed, in particular since coming into a phase of family, having a family and where you really need to just be on top of things, is this attentiveness to stopping when the job is done. And I've been delighted by just this way of being. Now, this isn't always the case because I'm not perfect, and sometimes I will decide, or life circumstances are what they are. But in general, I've, for a long time, been watching a habit of cleaning the entire kitchen. Clean the sink out, clean the stove, clean the counter, sweep the floor. Everything's back and clean. And then every once in a while, I'll feel inspired, right, to do a deeper dive, right? And it's like some of the deeper places that, collect dirt and whatnot. But there's something about that attitude that I'm looking at and really appreciating. And where else can I apply that thoroughness? Where else can I apply that commitment to go even further? Right? And then what is it like to wake up in the morning with a clean kitchen? What is it like to wake up in the morning and to come into your relationships and they're clean? You're not letting the resentment stick around. Like, no, let's finish that one. Let's address that one. I'm not going to feel rested if there are these messes hanging out. So I think this is a great time to be looking at these ideas, to be exploring, crossing our threshold for thoroughness, for commitment, to living in alignment, to living in our joy, to living in our love. Let's sing a song. The purpose of your life is this moment. Live here now. The purpose of your life is to live it. Live here now. Every frown and every smile, all the feels and all the while, you are holy. Perfect peace and perfect grace, love finds you in this place where you are now. The purpose of your song is to sing it. Sing your song. The purpose of your song is to live it. Share your song. In your pain and in your grief, there's nothing that you need to keep. We give it all to the one that holds it all, will hold you as you fall sweetly undone.